because I always thought that science and art were in a way, if not brethren, then kind of like cousins, where one is creativity in service to discovery, and the other is vice versa, discovery in service to creativity.
Yeah.
And those two fields feed off of each other, and add science adds certain ideas to art. And when I'm talking about science, I'm talking about the scientific method, the search for all knowledge. I'm not talking about just physics and biology and all this. I'm using a much more broader term. So that's all that I think that some people make connections with. But you're certainly correct that the, there's this constant rhetoric that art is this or art is that, when art is only a thing unto itself.
Well, yeah, I mean, art can affect, but yeah, art is something that, like the pursuits of science, like the pursuits of politics, like the pursuits of, I guess, sociology would be considered a semi-science. But yeah, art. I mean, you have to recognize what 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 is the purpose of life? Why do we do the things we do? Art helps us, as I said, translate reality and understand a bit of this. But at the same token, it seems to me that it has to be the thing that's the most essential to why we exist. Because okay, we human beings conquer the globe. We'll colonize other planets. Whether or not the Earth survives in 4 billion years, maybe we move out into the galaxy. Maybe we learn how to control the fundamental forces of nature, so that the we can control that the cosmos doesn't endlessly go on or what. But what? Why? Just to exist? Just to do this? You know, it's the old Sisyphus thing. Why do we exist? You know, how many times have you heard a mother say, "Well, you know, I'm suffering so that my children can have better," and then the children
I've
say,
also
"Well,
heard many mothers say the purpose of life is love.
yeah,
Life is another one of those things like art that is an amorphous beast, and we bring our own meaning to it, but is constantly given labels as if one thing defines it.
well, there has to be a payoff though, because if everyone is just self-sacrificing for the next generation, what the fuck, you know? Because I mean, it's a crapshoot as to whether you're going to have a Charles Darwin or a George Washington or a Genghis Khan or this some person of influence in your life. And in a certain sense, I got into an argument with someone about the greatness of people who could be evil or whatnot. The people who move society one way or the other, greatness, you have to accord that to them. And the person I was arguing with just didn't understand that. But
Well,
there's
Genghis
nothing.
Khan is a good example because he certainly had huge influence and was a great man, but his influence was certainly negative too because the
Negative and
expansion
positive.
the expansion to the well, he had his positives too,
Yeah.
but the expansion to the New World was deterred by his Mongol horde. The positive, of course, was the fact that he was uniting different nations. So there's good and bad there.
And he was also uh, basically a non-theist. He allowed religious freedom
Yeah.
in his conquered countries, and people had social mobility. It was one of the first empires or one of the first nations where you could be a sheep herder, but you were based on talents alone. He was
He
one of the
wasn't like
first.
Alexander, where he was just wantonly conquering everything in sight and not assimilating them into his horde.
Yeah,
Genghis Khan had positives and negatives, and the whole dualistic thinking about him is, for instance, I was talking to an Iranian, and if you know anything about Genghis Khan, you know that Iran was absolutely destroyed by his Mongol horde in lots of ways.
yeah.
But she just couldn't see, just based on this little bit of history, of the positives that Genghis Khan also released upon the world. And it's this whole dualistic thinking that just because he's clearly evil in the sense that he's murdering everything in sight, but he also brought tons of positives to the world. He wasn't like
People have they, like I said, in art, people will talk about like or dislike versus good or bad, and they can't see the difference. Evil and goodness are on totally different domains than greatness and lack of influence. They are different things, And people cannot separate these. People have a terrible time with abstract things, whether it's deep time or whether it's the idea of just nothingness. This is why I'm doing, for example, some of these shows about these things like death and the nature of existence, is because most people are idiots. And some of the people that I've actually interviewed don't get things. And I sometimes, when I'm talking to people in these interviews, I'm like, this person has a PhD and they don't see the very elemental, simple things that I do that are correct and have been shown correct throughout history. They don't get it. And as I'm not saying this because I'm saying, well, Dan Schneider is so much smarter than everyone else, but that's just the reality, is that there are things that I, as a great artist, can see. And great artists can see things more deeply than a philosopher.